Next, we'll take a look at the coronary arteries, which provide the vitally important blood supply to the heart itself. The detailed branching pattern of these vessels is highly variable. What we'll see here is just one example. To see the coronary arteries, we'll look from above at a heart from which most of the epicardial fat has been removed. Here's the pulmonary trunk. Here's the aorta. To see where the coronary arteries arise, we've removed both atrial appendages. The left atrial appendage was here. The right atrial appendage was here. Here's the right coronary artery. It arises from the right aortic sinus, which is here. The right coronary artery gives up this branch to the upper part of the right atrium, then runs downwards in the right atrioventricular groove, giving off branches to the right ventricle. The right coronary artery passes round to the underside of the heart. Here it is again. Its terminal branch is the right interventricular artery. Now, we'll look at the left coronary artery. Here it is. It arises behind the pulmonary trunk from the left aortic sinus. The left coronary artery soon divides, giving off this circumflex branch and several branches to the left ventricle, the longest of which is the left interventricular artery, also called the left anterior descending artery. The circumflex branch of the left coronary artery runs around to the underside of the heart in the left atrioventricular groove, sending further branches to the left ventricle. The blood that goes out by way of the coronary arteries returns mainly by way of a system of coronary veins, which join to form a large venous channel, the coronary sinus. As we saw earlier, the coronary sinus ends by entering the underside of the right atrium here. Here's the coronary sinus in an intact heart. The coronary sinus passes around the left intraventricular groove to the underside of the heart. Its opening into the right atrium is just below and in front of the inferior vena cava. Coronary veins from the right side of the heart also empty into the coronary sinus. Now that we've seen some dissected specimens, let's take a further all-around look at an intact heart with all the epicardial fat intact. We'll take a second look at all four chambers in the order in which blood passes through them. Here's the right atrium with the superior vena cava entering above and the inferior vena cava below. Here's the right atrial appendage. Here's the location of the tricuspid valve. Here's the right ventricle. It's almost obscured by fat. Here's the infundibulum. The pulmonary valve is here. Here's the pulmonary trunk passing to the left of the aorta and dividing into the left pulmonary artery and the right pulmonary artery. Here's the left atrium with two pulmonary veins entering on the right and two on the left. Here's the left atrial appendage. The mitral valve is here. Here's the left ventricle. Its outflow pathway is here, leading to the aorta. Here's the aorta, and the aortic valve is here. So far, we've been looking at the heart by itself, with the major vessels that leave and enter it divided. To see where those vessels go, and also to see the pericardial sac around the heart, we'll look at a dissection in which the anterior chest wall has been removed from the first rib to the eighth rib. The diaphragm is here. On each side, the lungs are quite collapsed. If they were fully expanded, they'd be out to here. Here's the heart, hidden within its protective sac of pericardium. In the intact body, the front of the pericardial sac is attached to the back of the sternum by this strip of mediastinal fat, all of which we'll remove. All this is the pericardial sac. The only major vessels we can see at this point are the aorta, emerging from the pericardial sac here, and the superior vena cava, entering it here. To see more, we'll remove this much of the pericardium. Here's the heart, well covered with epicardial fat. The ventricles are freely mobile within the pericardial sac. Below, the pericardium is reflected onto the upper surface of the diaphragm, to which it's densely adherent. To right and left, the pericardium lies back to back with the parietal pleura. Here's the root of the aorta and of the pulmonary trunk. Here's the superior vena cava, entering the right atrium from above. Each of the great vessels passes through an adherent cuff of pericardium as it enters or leaves the pericardial sac. Here's the inferior vena cava, coming up through the diaphragm. Here are the left pulmonary veins and the left pulmonary artery, passing through the pericardium separately. On the right, the pulmonary vessels are harder to see because they lead through a continuous cuff of pericardium that they share with the inferior vena cava. Here are the pulmonary veins. The artery is out of sight, up here. Once we've understood the heart in 3 dimensions, understanding the great vessels that enter and leave it becomes straightforward. The superior and inferior vena cava and the aorta are shown in tape 3 of this atlas, and we'll see more of the pulmonary artery and veins later in this section. Now let's review what we've seen of the heart. Here's the right atrium, the atrial appendage, the superior vena cava, and the inferior vena cava. Here's the interatrial septum, the fossa ovale, the opening for the coronary sinus, and the tricuspid valve. Here's the right ventricle. Here are the papillary muscles, and the chordae tendineae, and the infundibulum. Here's the pulmonary valve, and the pulmonary trunk, branching into the left pulmonary artery and the right pulmonary artery. Here's the left atrium. Here are the pulmonary veins, right and left. Here's the interatrial septum again, and the mitral valve. Here's the left ventricle, the interventricular septum, the left ventricular outflow pathway, the aortic valve, and the aorta. Here's the left coronary artery. Here's the right one. Here's the coronary sinus. Here are the pericardium and pericardial sac. Now, we'll move on to look at the lungs.